Ladies and gentlemen, it's 3 o'clock. We'll call this Board of ECUA Board meeting to order. Mr. Perkins will offer our opening.
Pray, Almighty God, thank you for the opportunity to meet here and vote on projects. We hope that we will do your will. We thank you so much for everybody that comes and participates in this project, in this process. Guide our thoughts and our actions and have us do that which would be right and just. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. The next item is the adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any additions to the agenda? Mr. Perkins?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things here. Under unfinished business, I'd like to add transition to new executive director.
Okay. Transition, okay.
And I think everything else I have is actually an agenda item, so that'd be fine.
Okay. Ms. Campbell?
I would like to add under unfinished business, attorney.
Okay. Anyone else? Is that all, Ms. Campbell? Do I have a motion to accept the agenda adopt the agenda as amended? Mr. Perkins?
So moved.
Ms. Campbell?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please vote. And it passes 4-0. The next item is a public hearing on two items. At 3 o'clock is the proposed establishment of revised water and wastewater rates and charges, and also the proposed establishment of revised sanitation service charges. I have two pink slips. I don't know if these people are wanting to be heard on the public hearings. If so, let me call on you and tell me if it's not the case. And if anyone else wishes to be heard, there are pink slips over there on the desk. If you will fill that out, and you will be recognized. The first person is Cecil Johnston Jr. Mr. Johnston, did you want to be heard on the public hearing? Yes. Okay, please come to and press the speak button, if you will, up there. It will turn your red light on. Good. And then if you'll give your name and your address for the record, and you will have 5 minutes.
My name is Cecil Lee Johnston, Jr. I'm a natural person. My address is care of 40 Penhaven Drive, Pensacola, Florida. And it's in regards to, my mother just died, and so I had the utilities transferred over into my legal fiction's name. I realize that y'all are a monopoly, y'all are transmitting utility, y'all are a corporation. And as such, you cannot deal with me as a natural person. You must deal with my legal fiction. On the rate increase, I can't understand why. I mean, my water, I used $20.02 of water. I over doubled that in sewage, $41.22. There's $11 in future improvements on here. And now you're talking of raising them again. We have no recourse. As I said, you are a monopoly. As such, I have received statements. Statements are not bills. Henceforward, I have a legal notice here that's been notarized for y'all. Henceforward, I accept your statements and accept them for value. And the due date is declaring the date that you will be sending me a true bill, because a statement is not a bill. Thank you. That's all I got to say. May I bring this to you?
Yes, please. Thank you. Oh, careful.
I'll mute it.
And don't sue us if you got injured. Oh, let's see. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnston. I don't believe anyone has ever raised that objection to the statement. It's what's interesting.
Well, I'm a commerce consultant. Most people don't know what I know.
Okay. Well, thank you for speaking to us. And the next person is Erica Floyd from 2940 Bayview Way. Ms. Floyd?
Hi, my
Hello.
name is Erica Floyd, 2940 Bayview Way, Pensacola, Florida. I'm speaking to item 8J on the agenda.
Ms. Floyd, can we postpone that? This is the
Absolutely.
public hearing regarding the rate increases.
That's fine, I just
So I will
wanted to-
recognize you when that
Fantastic,
comes up. I have one more, and is this Chester Holland? Did I say your name correctly, sir? Oh. And press the button that says speak.
Thank you.
Good.
I have a hearing problem, so I have a hard time hearing.
Sure.
The reason I'm here, I'm speaking for myself and hopefully to two other groups. One of them's the senior citizens, which I'm a senior citizen, and the other's the less fortunate. You know, what you're asking for may not sound like much, but to some people it's a lot. When you're stuck on a fixed salary like the senior citizens are, less fortunate, that's a lot of money for them. It's time to put a freeze on everything that goes and increase. Hold it off for a while. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Mr. Sorrell, would you respond? What kind of programs do we have for people who have financial hardships?
Actually, if you get in touch with our customer service department, they can give you the great details. But we have programs available for people under certain income levels, which will dramatically reduce the amount of money that you pay us. I forget the name of the program, but it's, what was that, Patty? Lifeline. I should have known that. There's a Lifeline program, so if you're in a certain income bracket, your rates will be significantly reduced just because you're in that bracket. The customer service manager or director is Gabe Brown. We'll get you that information before you leave here, and I'd appreciate it if you would give him a call and talk to him. If you don't get him, feel free to call me and I'll get you the answers.
I have no more pink slips. Is there anyone else who wishes to address this body in the open forum? If not, I will declare this public hearing closed. So we need to adopt Resolution 1907 and 1908. Do I hear a motion for the adoption of these resolutions? So they are, Resolution 1907 is a final rate-setting resolution establishing revised water and wastewater rates and charges on page 5. Resolution 1908 is a final rate-setting resolution establishing revised sanitation charges on page 10. Is there a motion? Dr. Walker.
I move that we approve both of these resolutions.
Okay, you move up Resolution 1907 and 1908. Is there a second?
I second. I have to ask the attorney if we can do both resolutions at one time like that. I don't think so.
Okay. Dr. Walker, would you like to amend?
I move that we approve resolution number 1907.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Perkins. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Perkins.
Make a motion to amend. I amend that approval includes the execution of the engineering portion of the River Gardens Sewer Expansion Project.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Dr. Walker? Did you wish to speak, Dr. Walker?
I will.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, thank you. What will we take out of the budget in order to provide the $1 million for this proposed addition?
Yeah, that's the cost of the project. I'm looking at the cost of the engineering. And so the engineering will be considerably less. And I think the project's a little higher than that, but the engineering cost will be considerably less than that. But when I brought this up before, we decided it'd be best, you know, we have a bunch of projects, some get done, some don't get done. We have a big project contingency fund that oftentimes has a lot of money in it. So I thought rather than, you know, decide, and I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to break out that CIP list and act something, you know, if we need to. But I thought it'd be better to let staff look at it as the year goes on and adjust and figure out what would be best. The contingency fund could fund it easily by itself, but if there's other things that need to be done, we could do it.
Dr. Walker, can you continue?
Yes. What is the amount, the estimated amount of for the engineering cost of the River Gardens project?
Mr. Sorrell?
I expect it to be in the range of 100,000. Too many microphones on. I expect it to be in the range of around 100,000, ma'am.
Okay. You may continue.
Madam Chairman, I think we can find 100,000 somewhere. I have no objection to the amendment.
Okay. Ms. Campbell?
I don't know if the small piece on Palm Forest Road made it in that 2.4, but that is something that the neighbors did not want, so there's 150,000 right there. It didn't make it. Oh, sorry. But I agree with Dale that I think staff can move around. Anytime that we can keep any rate hike under the CPI, which is what I promised when I first ran back in 2012, that, and we can do sewer expansion, I'm for it. We need to, there's a lot of sewer expansion we need, but this is one project that I would agree with.
I don't object to this, and those people have been waiting while my district keeps getting boatloads of sewer expansion money, so I'm certainly going to support this. I would say that from a policy perspective, I sort of hate doing it like this, where it's sort of the rates are kind of held hostage by one project, and I would hope we would, not that you're doing that, you hear me. You know, when we go through all of the budget deliberations and we look at projects and we move them around, I think that's the time for us to do it, and I think we would have all been amenable to that. And so I hate to establish a precedent, because I believe we have a process that works, and I'd like to continue that. Having said that, I will support this. I will also say I've had a couple of calls of people who just are tired of bills going up, and believe me, I'm right there. You know, we're not the county where appraisals go up and families move in and the tax rolls go up without any press of the button. If we are to accommodate the rising costs, and with the more robust economy, our costs are increasing for labor, for materials, for chemicals. You know, this is an inevitable part of the process. We're pretty stingy with the ratepayers' money, and I think you will find all of the people at this table to believe that to be the case. And yet we are guardians of a very important infrastructure to this community. So we have to balance the pocketbooks of our ratepayers and this huge investment. And I think the modest increase is probably the best that we mortals can do. Ms. Campbell.
Oh, thank you. And in Dale's defense, I believe he did bring that up back at CAC, so we had ample time discuss moving it around.
Didn't happen. Dr. Walker?
I'd like to explain some of the reasons why I favor
Sure.
this rate increase, these rate increases. First of all, with regard to the 2.3% for the CPI, for the water and wastewater programs, excuse me. The consumer price index for the nation is a little bit more than that, I think. Certainly in the same ballpark. And no, we don't have to match the increase in the consumer price index every year. We could not do that. But every time we do not match that general cost of living in America, we will fall a bit further behind in meeting our obligations to provide good water, wastewater, and sanitation programs in the county. We have some employees here today because their work teams have won national awards for the excellence of the wastewater treatment programs at their plants, at their wastewater treatment plants. This is a great honor for a local wastewater utility to receive such awards. But we cannot perform at that level without having adequate resources. And yes, we could do without this raise. We could do without next year's raise, but then we'd be falling behind. When I first came on this board many years ago, the board of that day found itself in a desperate position. It was so far behind in coming up with the revenues necessary to run the organization in a halfway adequate manner that 6 weeks after I took office, we voted on a 21% rate increase. Now that's a big rate increase. That's a really bad rate increase. It's not something that anyone in this room would have been happy voting for. Well, a 2.3% seems a lot more reasonable. And if we can, by having these small rate increases, avoid having to swallow such large eggs at some times, then I think we're taking the wiser course. Another way of looking at this 2.3% rate increase for water and sewer is to ask, what does it make possible in our budget? Now, essentially, the operating budget is pretty well fixed. It's not subject to a lot of increase or decrease. But the capital budget, the budget for capital improvements, for new facilities, new water lines, replacing old water lines, and so forth, those capital projects can require large expenditures. This year, we started out with an estimate that we could afford $24 million in capital budget. Eventually, we came up with $30 million instead. That $30 million was made possible instead of the $24 million, basically by this rate increase. And what that is paying for, what that made it possible for us to add to the list of capital projects for the year. The next two in line were two expenditures related to establishing a second, a new water line going from Pensacola to Pensacola Beach. We are required to provide water to Pensacola Beach. It's an obligation, a responsibility that we have. We don't have any choice about it. About 20 years ago, we put a water line in the water, and lay it down in the mud at the bottom of Sound and the bay to replace the old one that was there before that. Now, 20 years later, we have to replace that one. We don't have any choice in that unless we're going to be so irresponsible as to not be sure that we could provide water to Pensacola Beach. That's what this 2.3 essentially is paying for. And I think it's something that has to be done. We face pressures from EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We currently are under a signed legal agreement with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection that we will spend $7 million a year for 16 years to improve our wastewater collection and transmission system so that we can reduce the number of spills, the number of spills that occur from sewer lines and lift stations throughout our system. And we have no choice but to do what we told FDEP we would do. If we had not agreed to that, they would have imposed a more draconian measure on us. Instead of $7 million a year, they could have insisted it would be 10 or 15 million a year. And instead of 16 years, it could have been 10 years or 12 years. So that's something that we have to do. Finally, in today's market, today's economy, and it may change. I keep hearing that we may have a recession soon. But right now, the economy is hot. The unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in 20 or 30 years. And we have to compete with the private sector and with other governmental bodies to get to hire good employees. They are costing us more money. We're having to increase our salary levels and so forth, some of that, just simply to have decent, adequate people on the job, not to reward anyone excessively, but just to have positions filled that we must have filled. Those are some of the reasons why. There are others too that could be come up with, but those are some of my reasons for supporting these rate increases. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I'm sure that the people appreciate hearing something other than us just pressing our yes button. It's nice to have you explain those things. I see no other lights. We are voting on resolution number 1907. Please vote. And it passes 4-0. Item 4B2 is the adoption of resolution number 1908, a final rate-setting resolution establishing revised sanitation service charges. Is there a motion? Mr. Perkins?
Move the resolution.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion on the sanitation rates? Dr. Walker?
I second the
It's
motion.
been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no lights, please vote on the revised sanitation rates. And it passes 3-1. That concludes our public hearing and our adoption of rates. Next comes open forum, and I have two slips. Ms. Floyd, if you will address us under the open forum, please.
Hi again. My name is Erica Floyd. I'm at 2940 Bayview Way in Pensacola, Florida. I am the president and owner of Gulf Civil Engineering, also here in Pensacola, Florida. I am a small, disadvantaged, woman-owned business, and I submitted a response to the RFQ from ECUA for the General Engineering Consulting Services. That's item 8J. I've been in business for myself for 7 years. I've been in the engineering field for almost 20 years. I consider myself in Gulf Civil Engineering qualified. I've done many successful projects in the community. I was the engineer of record for the recent Escambia County Correctional Facility, as well as for the new Studer Family Children's Hospital at Sacred Heart. I've just completed a very significant, successful sanitary sewer project for Sacred Heart Hospital, which took 3 aged lift stations offline and converted them to a gravity sewer system which connected to an ECUA main. I'm currently working on a regional sanitary sewer project in Santa Rosa County that is also taking 3 lift stations offline and upgrading another. Again, I consider myself qualified. ECUA released an RFQ to give other engineering firms in our community an opportunity to be added to a pre-qualified list, and 6 firms responded. Shockingly, without any discussion or questions from the board last week, you voted not to add any new companies to your list of firms at this time. I think I can speak for the other engineering firms that also submitted a response to your RFQ that we put a lot of time and effort and resources and our own money in some cases into this submittal at your request. What I heard last week at the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting was that the reason you were choosing not to add to this list was because it could be politically charged. And I think that's sending the wrong message to this community, which is, don't try. You won't get anywhere because it could be politically charged. Statements were made that we, being ECUA, went out and did a request for qualifications for anybody else that wanted to be added to this particular list. And certainly the firms listed here, all 6 of them can do the work. But this could get politically charged. There are certain people and certain firms that I think are having concerns about adding any other firms. So you said all firms, all 6 were qualified, yet you didn't add any. 2 firms were recommended by ECUA staff to be added to the list, yet you chose to select no one. So I am here today to ask you to reconsider. Add all 6 to the list. Do the right thing and follow through with the intention of the RFQ. Add these qualified firms that took the time to respond at your request for qualifications. Thank you for your time.
Before you leave, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Floyd? May I ask you one thing? You said you were a disadvantaged firm?
I am a registered DBE, yes, with
Okay.
the state of Florida.
So that applies to women-owned businesses?
Yes.
Okay. It's funny, I guess I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yes, it's true.
No one else has questions, so thank you very much. Okay, I also have Alicia, and Ms. Floyd, we're not having a deaf ear to you. This will be discussed when it comes up, presumably. The next person is Alicia Hahn and Charlotte Hooks, I believe. Are you going to tag team, or is?
I'd be glad she didn't bring her partner, Carrie.
That's right. You wouldn't have been able to get us out of here all day, so.
She doesn't know me either, does she?
No, she doesn't. So while we're here is on August 14th, I submitted a request to Mr. Gabe Brown, the Director of Customer Service, who, by the way, has been very helpful and very good with his follow-up, as to why our last 2 to 3 months of ECUA bills. First of all, we represent the HOA for Gallia condominiums, which is Lost Key Marina and Yacht Club. Why our last 2 to 3 months bill was so much higher than all other bills that we knew of. And also, we're in preparing for our budget for next year, what type of increases that we're needing to budget for and that type of information. So that's why the original request went out. He responded with, we don't know why your bills basically have gone up the last 2 to 3 months. Let's look at a history, and so therefore the last history of every bill was pulled since August of 2016. In doing so, we found out there were 10 months, 11 months, and I think 10 months in 2018 where we were underbilled, or the bills were lower, much lower than normal. And then in the process of seeing those, our bill payer, who is with Perdido Sands Realty, who is our property manager and who pays all of our bills for us, said that she called ECUA on those bills plus some other bills from other condos twice in 2018 when those bills were considerably lower, and was told they were correct. But in finding this history, now that we pulled the history since 2016, actually we've pulled since 2011, we have been told now that we're being back billed a little over $18,000 in water and sewer, that obviously that money is now gone. We don't have it in the current year's budget, it's from a previous year. And it wasn't our mistake, it was a meter. They said that it was the meter was reading incorrectly. So
The multiplier.
the multiplier was incorrect. But it's weird because the meters were separated out apparently in 2017, so why all of a sudden they started in 2018 reading incorrectly, we're not sure, but nobody's been able to tell us that answer. But we're here to ask why we're being back billed for something that was not our problem,
And
we called on it twice.
And when they found it, they still didn't bill for it. They started increasing the bills to the right amount, but they still didn't go back and bill. But
Right.
now they're wanting to go back over a year and bill.
Right. So that's what we're here for, is we don't think this is correct.
So tell me what your average bill is.
So our average bill ranges anywhere from 1,000, 1,500 to
2,800?
2,800 maybe
Oh.
a month. Our daily usage is usually anywhere from in the 4,000s to the 7,000s daily usage. As far as, I guess that's gallons, whatever. So the bill, like I said, ranges anywhere from 1,700 and something a month all the way up to 2,800 and something a month on norm. The last 3 months, it's been 3,400, almost 3,500 and $4,500, which we are actually doing. We've been checking every single condo in the building for running toilets and dripping faucets, and we have found some and are making sure those are getting repaired. So we're doing our due diligence on that end of things,
Right.
to try to not have overconsumption of water and sewer. But it's mainly our concern is $18,000 bill
Right.
that, it wasn't our problem, so.
Sure. Just hold on,
Any other
because people
questions? Yeah.
might have questions. Ms. Campbell?
So you called twice in 2018 and was told that our figures,
We didn't, our person,
Our
Perdido
management
Sands Realty, who does our property management and
Who-
pays
do you
all
know
of
who
our
that
bills.
was?
Marshall Horn.
so she called twice?
She said she called twice asking about
And
why
she-
the bills were so much lower.
And she called on multiple, she does, I think, 11 different condos out towards Perdido Key, and she called on multiple ones. So she doesn't know exactly what day she called on or anything like that.
So I know it's a little cumbersome,
Yes.
but if everything gets directed through the chair,
Yeah.
that's just a better way
Yes.
to,
Okay.
and you will have an opportunity to ask everything. And again, I'm not trying to be uppity, it's just.
It's okay.
No, no.
Yeah, okay. Ms. Campbell, to continue. Did you have any further questions?
So have we made any options? Have we given any options for the payment of this $18,000?
Mr. Sorrell?
I don't know all the particular details, but I can tell you that Gabe has gone back and, Gabe Brown, he's gone back and looked at the history And there was actual consumption based on history, and I think he goes back 1, 2, 3 years. And he tries to use that as a basis for the amount of consumption. And then on the amount of consumption, he'll estimate the bill. And then I think he gave you 24 months to pay the $18,000 interest-free, I believe. So yes, he's made those arrangements, and you know, I don't know what else to tell you other than the fact that I know he's offered that. And that's what we do in these times. Every once in a while this happens, and we've entertained several of these in the past. And basically, it can't be free based on legal advice, but we try to go through and estimate it the best we can based on previous consumption. And then because it was a meter error, we offer you 24 months interest-free in order to pay that back.
Ms. Campbell?
So I'm still shocked that that's an estimated amount, and that was asked back then. I mean, they were doing their part by coming to us and saying, this isn't right, and we insisted that it was right, and then you budget accordingly. I mean, I just feel bad because they came to us on 2 occasions. So I'm willing to, I think we need to see if staff can look at this again. And then also, I think we can do some kind of leak adjustment because they're finding some leaks, and I'd like to send this back to staff.
Before you make a motion to refer, let me call on other people because there's some lights. Mr. Perkins?
Well, I've seen a couple of these come up before, and, we've tried to work with people, and it's really frustrating for me. I mean, because, we have a responsibility to accurately bill. I think we need to live up to that responsibility, and then when we don't, we need to take some responsibility ourselves. Now then, that being said, yeah, we don't want to, if it's an obvious blatant case and it's kind of an abuse, we don't want to reward them for that, but this doesn't seem to be that situation. But I know just that personally, I get my bill from Gulf Power every month, and if I were to get a notice from Gulf Power and say, oh, we underbilled you, the last couple of years for your electricity, and we're going to have to charge an extra $8,000 or so, I'd be pretty upset about that, and I don't know how compliant I'd be. I mean, they might shut the power off, but I'd get a generator and some solar panels and do what I could, but they'd probably send the law after me for that, but we'd probably end up in court or something. I mean, I would be real unhappy about it, about them not living up to their responsibility to accurately bill. And I think we have a responsibility to our ratepayers to accurately bill. Now, everything mechanical breaks. There are no perfect mechanical situations, but I think we need to, like Ms. Campbell said, take another look at it, and where we can legally justify, and I'm talking take a hard look at it, where we can legally justify for any leaks or just justify as low as we can on consumption, do what we can to adjust this bill down as much as we can rationally justify, and then allow them to spread it out. But I think we do need to try and work with them. I think just saying, hey, I'm sorry, but we underbilled you, and you're gonna have to pay us for the past that we missed is just not fair.
Well, this came up about, 6 months ago, something like that. It's a similar situation. And at the time, I said essentially what my colleagues are saying. I said, this is a contract. You get a piece of paper, it's a bill, you pay your bill, and you put it in your filing cabinet. It's done. And I know our attorney would say I'm practicing law without a license if I say it's a contract. But it seems to me, it feels as a consumer like a contract. When this came up last time, I called a former Gulf Power executive who is retired. And I said, what would Gulf Power do? And I outlined the situation. He said, well, assuming it's not a mega amount that would hurt the Gulf Power, we'd probably forgive it, which I thought was an interesting comment. Now, I don't know that we here today can say we would forgive it, but I think you've heard the members of this body expressing sort of support of your position, and I think probably the thing to do is what Ms. Campbell recommended, is send it back to staff, make sure whatever staff looks at is blessed by our legal department, to see if we can find some relief for you, because I think you have every expectation when you pay a bill that it's paid. So, Ms. Campbell, if you would like to make that motion.
Make a motion that we send this back to staff to take a harder look at and get the blessing of our attorney. We cannot give away water, but
Right.
I think, I think we can estimate on the lowest side possible, especially in light of, everything that's gone on. So I just recommend we send it back to staff and let them take a harder look and come back to us. Thank you.
Mr. Perkins?
Not second.
And did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Sure.
and just say that, there are disadvantages and advantages to having an elected board. I mean, a big advantage is that if you're unhappy, you can go get your board member and have redress in a public forum and get something done about it. A lot of corporations don't do that. One of the unfortunate things is that because we're a public entity and we operate with the citizens' money, we have more stringent requirements on what we can do and certain legal things we have to abide by. But I think that Ms. Campbell's suggestion is probably the fastest and quickest way to get the most relief to you that we can. So I support it.
Okay, Dr. Walker?
As a footnote to this general conversation, I would like to point out that we created 2 new staff positions with the budget that we have approved today. And those 2, only 2, we went from like 603 to 605 or something, but it's a very tight budget in that regard. And the 2 were both in the area of meter reading and processing the data from meter reading in a speedier fashion, so that situations like this would perhaps be less likely to occur.
I got a similar problem with AT&T. I've got like 4 or 5 channels that I can't get now because they've been removed. They haven't, it's like 5, 10, 15, 44, and it's the channel that the football games come on. So I'm like, I don't,
I wouldn't
don't
pay
know
my
what I'm gonna do.
Now
I might
that's
have
a
to
problem.
switch.
I see no more lights. So, we're moving on the motion to refer. And it passes 3-1. I want to reiterate that this in no way is an indictment of our staff. They do a phenomenal job, and they too are watchdogs of the customer's money. So, but your issue will go to staff, and then you will hear back from us.
And I do want to say that Mr. Brown has, like I said, done a fabulous job with his follow-up and quick responses and his gracious 24-month repayment thing, but it's still 18 grand.
Yes,
so,
right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I have no more pink slips, so that concludes our open forum. Presentations, we come now to the Recycle Star, and that is to reward those people who continue to do a great job of recycling, and we give them some perks. So we need to pull out, I have a list of 17 people who are qualified, of I'm sure thousands more, but we have 17 nominees. So we need to select who will get this month's award. Dr. Walker, would you like to play Vanna White? And it is number, oh, now this is tricky. What would you say this is? Is it a 6 or a 9? I think you hold it where the eraser's up.
Let's compare it to another one.
The professor.
The scientific method.
5. Okay, it's a 9.
Okay. Okay, and number 9 is Lieutenant Alex Collier. So staff will get with Alex Collier and extend the rewards. Thank you for your scientific evaluation of 6 versus 9. Okay, and we have some awards, which is always gratifying. The National Association of Clean Water Agencies 2018 Gold Peak Performance Award, and the Silver Peak Award for Bayou Marcus Water Reclamation Facility. So would the appropriate staff members please come forward to receive the awards? You want to make a speech?
Yes, ma'am, I'll just be real quick.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and the rest of the board members for having us today. As I said, I'll be quick because I know your agenda is rather large. These prestigious awards are for calendar year 2018, as you have said. The reason I say prestigious is there is only 8 given in the state of Florida, and that includes the 2 that we have earned. So there's only 6 other wastewater plants in the state of Florida that got these this year. Pensacola Beach had 100% compliance with their operating permit with a total of 4,153 compliance points. That marks 3 consecutive years they've got an award. Bayou Marcus made 3,565 out of 3,566. So they missed by 1, and that is because what comes down the pipe changes every day, and we got a bad day. I would like to mention, though, that these are not possible without our maintenance staff and our industrial equipment, our instrumentation, electrical groups. Without those guys, our equipment wouldn't be operating, and therefore we couldn't be doing what we're doing. And that's all I got.
So if you all will come up and let the board members gather, and we'll present these to you, and we'll have Natalie do a little photo op.
I'm surprised you're getting excited.
I only had 2, sorry.
No, that's all right. That's his. This one's his.
Okay.
Away from the screen.
Vicki?
Well, everybody
Stage
goes
left.
on the screen, I guess,
Stage
will mess
left.
up the camera.
Stage left.
Thank you. Good job.
Good job. Good job, baby. Always. It's one of the gratifying things we do. It seems like a throwaway, but boy, do we appreciate our employees. Did I just move over? I came to the wrong seat. Here we go. Okay. Next, we come to approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote. And it passes 4-4. The next item is the report of the citizens, 4-0, sorry. Sorry, the board group. The report of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Ms. Campbell, are you going to do this or have Mr. Perkins? Mr. Perkins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The committee met on August 20th with myself, Ms. Benson, Booker, Kevin Hammer, Chuck Kimball, Randy Ponson, Louise Ritz, Ms. Schneer, and Mr. Walker present. If you'll allow me, I'd like to just pull item J, because that's the one that
Yes.
we had a speaker on, so that we can discuss that. And then I'll just go through the other ones and move them as a group, since they were all unanimous, if that's okay. The first item is item F, award of chemical contract for supplemental carbon. Motion was made by Mr. Kimball, seconded by Ms. Ban, that the board approve the first of 2 optional 1-year contract extensions with Environmental Operating Solutions, Inc. for the supply of supplemental carbon at the unit price of $1.60 per gallon, and authorize payment from the appropriate line item. Committee votes 10-0. Item G, extension of chemical contract for orthophosphate. Recommendation was made by motion by Mr. Kimball, seconded by Ms. Benson, that the board approve an extension of the contract with Hawkins Dumont, Inc. of Apopka, Florida, for the supply of orthophosphate with funding from the appropriate budget line item. This will be the first of 2 one-year options to extend at the terms and rates contained in the original contract. Committee vote was 10-0. Item H, extension of chemical contract liquid chlorine. Motion by Ms. Ben, seconded by Ms. Booker, that the board approve the first of 2 optional one-year contract extensions with DPC Enterprises of Mobile, Alabama, for the supply of liquid chlorine at the unit price of $92 per cylinder, with the funding from the appropriate budget line item. Committee vote was 10-0. Item I, award a bid Pensacola Beach wastewater treatment plant number 2 lift station upgrade. Motion by Mr. Kimball, seconded by Ms. Ben, that the board waive as minor informalities in the bid received from Brown Construction of Northwest Florida and accept the minor correction made to the bid clarifying the company name to be Brown Construction of Northwest Florida, Inc., and not Brown Construction of NWFL, Inc. 2, authorize award of the contract for the Pensacola Beach Plant Number 2 lift station upgrade to the low and fully responsive bidder Brown Construction of Northwest Florida, Inc., in a total amount of $886,747.29, and authorize funding from CIP Project RS 731 Pensacola Beach Number 2 lift station rehabilitation, along with the transfer of $180,000 from CIP Project CS 417 CWRF tertiary filter upgrade to CIP Project RS 731. Committee vote was 10-0. Item K, annual contract for System 1000 Grease Control Program. Motion by Mr. Kimball, seconded by Ms. Ben, that the board approve the second of 2 optional one-year contract extensions for the System 1000 Grease Control Program with Envirotech of America for 20 lift station locations at a cost of $355 per lift station per month, or an annual cost of $4,260 per lift station, with funding from the appropriate budget line item. Committee vote 10-0. Item L, Central Water Reclamation Facility Chlorine Contact Chamber Coating Repairs. Motion made by Ms. Ben, seconded by Ms. Booker, that the board waive as a minor informality in the bid received from Decorating and Coating Applications LLC, DBA, DACA Specialty Services, and accept the minor correction made to the bid clarifying the company name to be Decorating and Coating Applications LLC, DBA, as DAC Specialty Services and not DACA Specialty Services. 2, award the contract for coating repairs of the CWRF chlorine contact chamber to Decorating and Coating Applications LLC, DBA, DACA Specialty Services, Norcross, Georgia, as low bidder in the amount of $592,250, as their bid meets all requirements for the installation and coating reliability. 3, authorize funding from CIP Project RS 732, CWRF Clarifier and CCC Coatings Repair, along with a transfer of $100,000 from RS 849E LS Codes and Standards to CIP Project RS 732. Committee vote was 10-0. Item M, Government Street Regional Pump. I'm just going to start over. No, I'm kidding. Government Street Regional Pump Station Pump Replacement. Motion made by Mr. Kimball, seconded by Mr. Ponson, that the board waive the bid requirement for the purchase of Government Street Regional Pump Station pump replacement due to the specific flow, pressure, and installation requirements at the station, and award a sole source purchase order to Pump and Process Equipment Incorporated, Pensacola, Florida, in the total amount of $1,074,000. 2, approve funding from CIP Project RS 886, Government Street Regional Pump Station pump replacement, along with the transfer of $500,000 from CIP Project RS 849E LS Codes and Standards to RS 886. Committee vote was 10-0. Item N, Agent Broker for Commercial Insurance and Bonds. Motion made by Mr. Kimball, seconded by Ms. Ben, that the board approve renewal of commercial insurance and bonds as proposed by FLC/FMIT and PRIA for fiscal years 2020 and 2021, with the following components included. One, authorize the executive director to negotiate renewal contracts with FLC/FMIT, the low bidder for property and automobile insurances for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. The FLC/FMIT's proposal reflects a 2-year rate guarantee and bundled pricing. Any changes or deletion of proposed coverages may result in repricing of remaining lines and coverages. 2, authorize the executive director to negotiate renewal contracts with PRIA, the low bidder, for privacy and network liability, commercial crime, road restoration bond, and flood insurances for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. And 3, approve funding through the appropriate budget line item for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. Committee vote was 10-0. I would move the committee report with the exception of item J.
Is there a second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please vote. And it passes 4-0. Mr. Perkins, you may continue.
Yeah, item J, the motion was made by Ms. Benson and seconded by Dr. Walker that ECUA remove the following firms from ECUA's list of firms pre-qualified for general engineering consulting services: Buchart, Horn, Inc., Connolly and Wicker, Inc., and did not add any additional firms to the ECUA's list of firms pre-qualified for general engineering consulting services, and allow the remaining 13 firms listed herein to remain. And I'll move the recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Let me ask a couple of questions, if I may, to Mr. Sorrell. How often do we do this, to go out for qualifications?
I think the last time, ma'am, that they did this was back in 2006, I believe, so it's been quite a few years. And, you know, there's quite a few firms on there, so it provides a lot of opportunity to use different firms. You know, 13 firms that are on there now, or 15 that are on there now. So there's just a lot of firms on there. We haven't had to upgrade that, except for the fact that 2 of the firms no longer do work for us at all, mostly because they're not in the area anymore. And that was the primary reason for going out and trying to update this list.
Okay. Is there any magic number that is there any rationale for being 13, 15, 20?
No, it's really not done on a basis like that. It's done more of a technical basis, to really look at the firms that can do the type of work that we do. And once we get to a certain number, I mean, it gets almost to be onerous because there's so many firms on there. And I think the intent was just to keep the really firms that do a lot of work for us on there, and firms that have proven qualified over the years. And I think that's what the engineering staff was recommending. So
I think you answered partly my question, but is there a rotation, like if we have 5 civil engineers on our list, do we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or do we just use the same one over and over?
No to both.
Okay.
Basically what we do is we have a knowledge of which firms have expertise in which areas. We also know generally which firms have staff available at the time, and we'll do that through communications and things. And basically, certain projects require certain types of engineers. Now, engineers are engineers, but there are some that have expertise in certain areas and certain ones don't. Some have a lot of staff and certain firms don't. So basically, it really depends upon who is available to do the work and who has the most qualified staff in that particular central point of concern at the particular time.
Okay. Mr. Perkins.
Well, we're hiring a new executive director, and I mean, they may have, he or she may have engineering background or may not have engineering background, may have, firms and knowledge and experience and stuff. And so I don't think there's anything that would preclude us, once we get that new executive director on, from looking at this if we wanted to. I mean, there's, by approving what we have now, that doesn't mean that we can't go forward in the future with other firms once we get a new director on board. You know, I don't know what the right number is. I personally was thinking, you know, probably around 10. I was thinking the less the better, unless they're overwhelmed and can't do the work and we need to add more. I mean, I don't know that this was I don't recall it being a board initiated thing. I think it's something that staff initiated, and so not really sure exactly the origins or anything, but you know, I think that what we have now is sufficient, but that if we, you know, get a new director on and the director says, hey, we may need more expertise or more firms or something like that, then I'd be willing to look at it.
Ms. Campbell?
I'm gonna go with this, but I wanted to say to the young lady that came, that I know exactly how you feel. I'm in an industry that, I went out on my own many years ago, and a woman-owned business, and it was real hard for me to get my foot in the door, you know, at a lot of places to begin with. So I kind of had to, you know, get my name known and whatever. So don't not come back just because we didn't add you to a already pretty large list this year. You know, come back again if the next time we do this. And we haven't done it since I've been on the board, so it was new to me, but I was reading the notes, and I always like to go with the choice of the CAC, unless there's a really good reason for me not to. And you know, I don't think this was any way personal whatsoever. I think it was just we got enough firms on there already, so I would say please come back again.
And
Just one moment.
And I think we do need to, you know, I think we need to at least look at, I mean, I don't know, you know, frankly, our engineering firms, I don't dig into it a whole lot, but I don't know if we have minority or what's considered disadvantaged, I guess is what you said, firms on that. But I think it might be part of the selection criteria. I mean, it might well be part of the selection criteria in any future RFQs, you know, that if we can, we have a percentage that reflects the population somewhat that we can, you know, that we can choose from. They got to be competent, you know, firms, but I think that's something worth looking at personally.
And we certainly do that with all of our bids. Yeah. One other question, Mr. Sorrell. Do we use this list exclusively? Do we ever go outside of this list? Is this a dictate?
Ma'am, we do not use this list exclusively. There are other firms who work for us all the time. It's just they have to go through a little different process. If it's under a certain amount, if it's in my authority, we can award it, but otherwise it has to come before the board and the board has to approve it. And we use them all the time. And there's no reason why we can't use Ms. Floyd and others, but it depends on the project. With the 13, I think, firms on there, that's a lot of firms. And I mean, they're not overwhelmed by any means, and they're all begging for work all the time. So what we try to do is pick the right firm for the specific job.
And Ms. Floyd, if I may just address you, it sounds like you have pretty great qualifications for the kind of work that ECUA does. So I would suggest that you meet with our head engineer and just say, here's my resume. I just hope you'll take a look at this. And if you have an opportunity to use me, I want you to know that I'm available. And I think we're open to, from what he said, people who are not on the list. And I would also hope that, as Mr. Perkins said, that once we have a new, our team is changing. And once we have a new executive director, this is probably an issue that may be revisited. So rather than us go against the Citizens Advisory Committee recommendation, I think it's something that will come up again, and I hope you'll be involved in that discussion. Any other discussion by the board? Please vote. And it passes 4-0.
That concludes the Citizens Advisory Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. And Ms. Floyd, one other thing. There is another open forum at the end of this meeting. If you would like to address us again on this subject, you're welcome to do so.
I would like to,
Ms. Campbell?
I would like to thank Mr. Perkins very much for chairing the CAC so well last week. I heard what a great job you did there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. You were missed. Okay, we move now to the operational item, Executive Director Search. Would you like to take a 5-minute break? I thought so. All right, we'll 10 minutes? We'll convene in 10 minutes. We'll call the meeting back to order. The next item on our agenda is item 9A, the Executive Director search, and we have Mr. Colin Benzinger here, and he would like to address us briefly. Mr. Benzinger, and thank you for all of your work.
Thank you, Colin Benzinger and Associates. And I think you have an excellent list of candidates to choose from. And we presented, I guess, a methodology we've suggested. I'd be happy to address that if you like. Sure. What I would say is this job, to me, involves two key skill sets. One, obviously, is understanding the technical side of a utility, and the second is working with the board. And so as you evaluate your candidates, which I'm sure you already all have, I would encourage you to consider both sides of the equation. You know, there's some candidates that have outstanding technical backgrounds, but have very limited, if any, experience working for a board, whereas there's some others that have experience working for the board, but do not have the same level of technical experience. So, you know, it's kind of a mix and match. The other thing I would say is, so far we're just dealing with paper. No, we've screened them and we've talked to them, and we're all very happy. My staff and I are very happy with the candidates, so it's not like you're just dealing with paper. But, you know, until you actually see those people face to face, and they see you, it is a two-way street. You know, you won't know who you want to hire to succeed Mr. Sorrell. So I typically encourage my clients to see more rather than less candidates. I would encourage you to see at least 3 with an alternate, preferably 5 total. But that's your call, certainly, and I have clients that go with 4 candidates or 3. My concern with 3 or without an alternate is simply that people drop out, or their spouse, as I was talking to the attorney actually a minute ago, you know, the spouse, once you're selected as a finalist, it suddenly becomes real. And maybe the spouse does not want to move to Pensacola for some reason, you know, the schools, the kids, whatever. So my only point is that I would suggest that you select at least 3. I would suggest you select an alternate as well, or 4 and no alternate, or preferably, from my point of view, 5. But that's up to you. It's your process at this point. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to
Does
answer
anyone
them.
have a question for Mr. Benziger? Dr. Walker?
Yes, I have one. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Benzinger, 2 of the candidates had histories of a lot of conflict with their elected overseers. And I don't know whether, you know, in reading what I read, I have no idea whether that means they were the bad guy and the councilmen were the good guys, or they were the good guy and the councilmen were a bunch of scalawags who needed to be challenged. In your review of them, could you look at that? Did you look
Sure.
at that, and make some determination that in fact the job applicant seemed to be the guy on the good side?
I assume you're talking about Mr. Coffey and Ms. Craig. I could be wrong about that.
Well, Mr. Coffey and Mr. Woody, both, I think, as well as possibly others too. But
Okay. Mr. Coffey served in his position for 13 years, I believe, and, you know, there's a saying in the profession that they're going to get you sooner or later, it's just a matter of when. Now, Mr. Sorrell is clearly an exception to that rule, and there are exceptions to the rule. But I think Mr. Coffey did an admirable job. We looked at that, and, you know, sometimes your board just wants to go a different direction. The same, Mr. Woody is still employed, and so, you know, he may have had some controversy there, but in terms of being a good, solid candidate and somebody that I think you should see, I definitely recommend him. Ms. Craig, you know, has been in a couple of really difficult situations. Delray Beach, where she's just left. I think they're on their 5th manager now. They're bringing in their 5th manager in like the last 6 or 7 years, maybe 8. West Palm Beach, where she was also fairly briefly, was another situation where the water utility there had frankly been mismanaged for many years. And sometimes they kill the messenger, shoot the messenger. So I work very comfortable with everybody on this list, and if you're a city or a county manager, the chances are there's been some controversy. It's just the way it is, real or imagined.
Anyone else? We need to decide how we're going to go forward, and any comments we want to make about the different candidates. Ms. Campbell, you're recognized.
Well, I'd like to agree with Colin that I think, I know we don't want to spend a lot of money, and that's always an issue with the ratepayers, but at the same time, we don't want to pick 3 and all 3 say, I changed my mind. It is something that could happen. So I'm happy with 5. I don't think we need to talk to all 8 and make 8 people come to Pensacola, but I would be happy to narrow it down to 5. And I think they look good on paper, but sometimes when you meet people face to face, like you said, they might not like us, or we may just eliminate them. But that's the way I feel right now. I'd like to try to narrow it down to 5 today.
Other board members? And for what it's worth, I think there are 2 that on paper are head and shoulders above the rest. And part of me would like to save the money and just bring 2 in, and I hear Mr. Benzinger, and I think there are 2, and then there are 2 more, and then there's the rest. I think there's a big gap between 4 and 5, at least in my mind. I think we could comfortably come up with 4, which would be my preference, just because, first of all, you're disrupting their lives, and it's a cost to the utility. So Ms. Campbell says 5, I say 4. Other thoughts, because we can go anyway. Mr. Perkins.
Why don't we rank them? Why don't we just rank them 1 to 5 and see where everybody's at? And then if there are 4 that seem to be kind of up the front, maybe just go with 4, maybe 3. If there are 3 that have overwhelming top 1, 2, 3. But I kind of agree with what you're saying. I mean, by the time you fly everybody down here, put them up somewhere, interview them, do the scheduling to get them down, make everybody's schedule fit, and then you're spending a lot of resource and a lot of time, and if there's one that you think might have a shot but doesn't really have a shot, is it fair to that person to have them kind of be strung along and think that they're, they might, of course, our attorney ended up like that, so you never know. I mean, we didn't think he had a shot either, so, but I'm thinking that the number's probably about 4, so.
Yeah. Well, there are 2 ways we can do it. We can either each rank, or we can say, all right, vote for the 4 people that you'd like to see, and then see how many people get votes, because presumably we won't all have the same 4, and then we could rank. Would that be comfortable? Okay. But then, okay, excuse me, that even if we each mark for 4, we could end up with 5 people. So
you want us to put a check mark next to 4 names?
yeah, that's
Okay.
what I think.
All right.
If everyone's in agreement, because we could still end up with 5 people if we do
Yeah,
that.
I just wanted to point out one question that I had asked Colin, that 2 of them did not have their salaries in here, and I just wanted to make sure they weren't some exorbitant thing that we weren't going to vote on anyway. And he said that they were in line with what we would be voting on.
Good. Any other red flags that came up from any of the board members that of concern? Mr. Perkins?
Well, I mean, they all had a red flag or 2. I mean, it's just the nature of the, it's the nature of the business. But, yeah, I don't probably hold off on getting into any names, because I don't want to, influence anybody's decision. But yeah, some had some, you know, quite a bit of press. Now, you know, like we all seen, I mean, we've seen good administrators, you know, get dismissed for being honest, you know what I mean? I
Right.
mean, that does happen. And so you know, you never know where that's at, but I mean, one of them, you know, is a pretty tumultuous thing, and the candidate seemed like one of the most qualified candidates, but a very, very tumultuous kind of separation. And then another one looks like he has support of, you know, the majority of the people on his board fairly comfortably, but he looks like he has got a couple of recent, you know, people after him. I mean, that person may just be sick of the headaches of dealing with a couple of people pounding on them, you know. So who knows? I mean, it's kind of like they said, you know, you look at the qualifications until we get them in here and interview them and ask them the hard questions. What was your salary? You know, we saw that X happened and so did this and this. You know, what was the story behind that? You know, it may be worth interviewing more, but I think about 4 is the number. There are a couple that I wouldn't feel comfortable with at all. I mean, there are a couple that I wouldn't feel comfortable with, not many. I mean, you know, if any of those pop up on the top 4, I'll voice objections more strenuously, but I don't think they will.
By the way, any of us who have read the press about ourselves understand that. Ms. Campbell?
So. We're just checking 4, right?
Yes, and just put a check by the 4 that you would like to see back. Yes, yes. Okay.
That'll be a public record.
I got 3. And you'll notice you have 2 more sheets.
I'm gonna have the ladies tally, so I'm out of it.
Oh, I didn't put a check by my name, but I did sign it.
I'm surprised Mr. Tweedy didn't apply. He's got a lot of experience in these meetings.
He wants the freedom to harass, not be harassed.
We actually did have a staff member apply, or at least one. Was it one? Just one? Staff member? We had 2.
Didn't make the cut, I guess. Now, that's always something that when I don't know, Mr. Bansinger, if when people apply, if they see someone inside the organization applying, if that gives them pause or anything, but I think that, you know, that the fact that people know that it's not a done deal, you know, that it is a fair and open process is probably helpful.
The answer to that is yes, it does give people pause when there's internal candidates that are recommended for the position. I mean, and it will scare some off, but in this case, we didn't really see the requisite skill set in the 2 that applied, so it wasn't an issue. If I could just say one other thing while we're waiting, and that is there was mention made possibly ranking the candidates. I would encourage you not to do that after you get done with your ballot. Simply I mean, whoever you pick, but until you actually see them, you know, you really won't know. it's paper, so it's kind of an artificial ranking at this point. And conceivably, you could scare somebody off if they, oh, I'm number 4, oh, I don't have a chance.
Right.
Reality is, everybody's got a chance who's invited, because that's the key of the interview.
That's why I suggested we just check the ones, because there might be a sleeper that we don't know about, and they might not come. I concur. And you've been in this business a lot longer than I have.
Kind of surprising.
Wow,
So he was number 6.
wow. Well, this is interesting. And there are 3 people who have gotten 3 votes. There are 3 people who have gotten 2 votes. And 1 person who got 1 vote. So,
we take the 3.
so I guess we can take the 3 people who got 3 votes and then choose among
The 2 votes.
the 3 people who got 2 votes. So the 3 people who got 2 votes,
That sounds reasonable, or we could just take the 3 who got the 3 votes, you know, but why don't you tell us who those 3 are, so
Okay.
we know that they're probably in or not, and that way we'll see if those are the ones we were thinking about.
yeah, interesting. The ones who got the 3 votes are Craig Coffey, Bud McCrory, and Rebecca Shelton. It's kind of interesting. The ones who got 2 votes were Marjorie Craig and Bruce Woody.
Marjorie Craig and who?
Oh, there were 4 who
Bruce
got,
Woody.
I apologize,
Woody.
there were 3 who got 3 votes. Let me read them again. 3 for Craig Coffey, 3 for Bud McCrory, and 3 for Rebecca Shelton. Is that what I told you before? And then there were 2 for Marjorie Craig, 2 for Louis Martinez, and 2 for Bruce Woody. So how would you like to proceed?
I think we should, oh, sorry. Take the 3 threes and vote on one of the 2s.
Okay? Does everyone want to do it that way?
Well, or we could, or we could invite all 6. I mean, I don't know if that's worth the expense or not, but one of the 3 was my top candidate, you know.
Me too.
Yeah.
So,
Me
so,
too.
I'd hate to leave that
Yeah,
person
one of them
off.
was mine. Okay.
Well, do we want to lobby for?
Well,
we
why
can e-
don't we check one of the 3, each of us check one of the 3 and see if there's a predominant person there. And then if not, we'll proceed. Does that sound reasonable?
Okay, we just want to check one of the 3.
Yeah, Craig, Martinez, and Woody, just check one.
Okay. All right.
Man, you're making that hard.
Craig Martinez and Woody.
And we can also, speak to a candidate afterwards. There's nothing that says this has to be blind. All right, check just one of those 3.
Now, there are a couple of these that are unemployed, might be a little easier to negotiate with too, you know. So,
Oh, Dr. Walker, did you want to say something?
Well, I didn't really want to, but I will say so. I suppose 4 heads are better than one, on something like this. But it's interesting to me to note that no candidate got the votes of all 4 of us.
That is interesting, isn't it?
So there's a certain disparity of opinions among us.
Okay, so Bruce Woody and Marjorie Craig each got 2 votes. So that means presumably Mr. Martinez will be eliminated. So the question is, do you want to bring in 5, or would you like to speak to any of these? And I will tell you my oh,
Go ahead.
Mr. Burke.
Well, you know, I'll wait, but whichever person we eliminated, if we eliminated one of the 2, would have the support of, half the board right now, because we're short a member. So I'm inclined to say we should invite both of them, or just the top 3 would probably be the way to go. So either, all 5 or just the top 3 would probably be the way to go.
Ms. Campbell?
I'm just gonna say top 5, only because I know how these things pan out, and 2 or 3 may say, I don't want to move from Missouri to Florida. I changed my mind.
All
So-
the people in Missouri are just saying that. I'm going to.
Yeah, right. That was just a joke. But, they might not want to come from Mobile to Pensacola. So, you never know, and they may get a raise if they stay or whatever. So, you usually lose 1 or 2 in these things, so I'd like to keep it at 5.
Well, if we're going to keep it at 5, we have 5 that have gotten the adequate votes. So did you want to make that as a motion? Because I heard support for that.
I'll make a motion that we keep the top 5 selected today.
I second. Those are Craig Coffey, Marjorie Craig, Bud McCrory, Rebecca Shelton, and Bruce Woody. Correct?
Coffey, Craig,
McCrory, Shelton, and Woody.
not McCrory, no. McCrory did not. It was
Oh, he wasn't one of the top?
Bruce Woody and Marjorie Craig got 2. Oh, I'm sorry. He got 3. I'm sorry. I was looking at the 2s. Yes, okay. So, to reiterate, Coffey, Craig, McCrory, Shelton, and Woody would be the 5. The motion is to invite all of those to the next round, and it has been seconded. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote. And it passes 4-0. There was a book out several years ago called The Wisdom of Crowds. And it talked about how the best decisions are made. There's the thing about a horse drawn by a committee is a camel. But it said that the best decisions and the most accurate decisions are usually made by a group of people that is sufficiently diverse. And they will always come up with a better decision than one person with all of the facts. And it was interesting that there was no unanimity on any one of the people being in the top 4. So this will be interesting. Thanks for all of the work and thoughtfulness that you all put into that. And Mr. Benziger, we're not done with you yet, apparently. Thank you for all that you did.
I had one thing.
Ms. Campbell.
I do wish that you would please give all of the candidates, all 8 of them, our appreciation for applying. They were all really good candidates.
I will do so, and I will make a hasty exit and notify the happy people and the unhappy, unfortunately, of their status. So, thank you.
Thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure.
Okay, the next item is item 9B, if I'm correct. The sole source purchase of a spare Taskmaster Titan grinder section. This is there's some urgency for this one. Mr. Sorrell, if you want to just briefly outline this, I think it's pretty simple.
Yes, ma'am. As each of you know, we use what are called grinders. We used to use what's called a muffin monster, and we switched over to the Titan grinders in the wastewater collection system. Essentially what these do is anything that's not supposed to be in the sewer system that's entering the pumps, it will grind it up in advance of that so it doesn't damage the pumps. We had a lot of problems with the muffin monsters, and we've been replacing those. What's in front of you today there is a purchase recommendation for the Titan grinder parts, so that we will have a spare grinder, so when the grinder breaks down, we will have a grinder that we can put in place and then take the old one out and have it repaired. These things are just so important because we get wood, we get bricks, and we get concrete blocks, and we get turtles and everything else up through the lines, and these grinders actually save our pumps in a big way, so this is real important.
Is there a motion? Ms. Campbell?
I'd like to move staff recommendation.
And second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please vote. Passes 4-0. Item 9C is the Lee Street Sidewalks Drainage and Sanitary Sewer Project of Escambia County. Is there a motion? Ms. Campbell?
Oh, no.
Do we have, this is a motion to approve the use of $387,000 and change reimbursed by the county for new sanitary sewer main to be constructed on Lee Street, as well as a transfer from the CIP. Is there a motion?
I'll move staff recommendation. This is part of the Navy Point.
This is Brownsville.
Oh, okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
I was at that meeting the other day, and then talks with the folks in Brownsville redoing Cervantes Street, and we talked about, let's make sure we all work together and get this done at the same time. So it was nice to see some legislators there all talking about maybe us moving in the right direction.
And I went to Tallahassee and tried to lobby for funding for some of this Brownsville. It's a commercial corridor that needs sanitary sewer. But you know what I love best about this item is this is in Mr. McCorvey's district, and it's something that he pushed hard for. So, you know, I think it's very important that we also take into account something that historically he had looked to do, and it's obviously the right thing to do. My one question is I want to make sure that in no way it interferes with funding for Navy Point Phase 4, which is underway. Mr. Sorrell?
No, ma'am, at this point, I do not believe that it'll impact the funding for that particular project. It probably will have an impact on some other projects, but not the one that you referenced.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? Please vote.
Somebody asked me today at Rotary if the governor had appointed anyone for 3 years. No, I wish they would.
Well, this is also a great case of cooperation between the ECUA and the county. There's a lot to tout about this. The next is item 9D, disposition of surplus property, 0.31 acre site adjacent to the Guillemard Emergency Storage Tank. And if we could, let's also take in 9E, if we can legally do that, which is disposition of surplus property, 0.5 acre site adjacent to the Guillemard Emergency Storage Tank. Mr. Perkins?
You know, I looked at these, and I don't know where we advertise or whatever. I don't know if it's just a news journal legal ad or whatever, but, you know, you could put these things on Craigslist and double what, you know, a half acre downtown for these prices. If these were my properties, I would not sell them for what our offers were, and so I can't in good conscience accept these offers. I think we should rebid them, at least put it on Craigslist, you know, for free. Put a link to the bid site or something, and, you know, and that's one thing I was concerned with when we first did them. I said, I want to make sure these are advertised properly. I don't know where we did it, but it didn't get any interest, you know, there was substantial interest. So I think we should, you know, reject these bids and rebid them in the interest of our ratepayers.
Is there a
And
second?
that's a motion.
I'll second, and I have a comment. I second his motion. You know, my thing was, I thought if they were put together as one, we might get more money. So I want to I want to reject the bid as well and kind of relook at it and see. I know we have a realtor, right? So,
We do have a realtor.
yeah. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, concur.
I'm in agreement.
Okay. I concur as well. I think I'd like to see either combined or deal with easements. I think the whole configuration needs to be revisited, and let's vote down the current bids and rebid this. And that's the motion. Any other discussion of this? So the motion is to reject bids and to rebid this project. If there's no other
Yeah,
discussion.
and if we don't get bids that we like next time, we don't have to sell the property.
Right.
I mean, we can, I mean, it's a half acre each downtown. I mean, you know, if I wasn't on the board, I'd probably be bidding on them, but wouldn't want there to be any kind of conflict or anything. But I think that they're worth way more than what we see here.
Mr. Beasley, if you will weigh in, what we're doing is legal and proper, I assume.
Yes, according to the section of the code related to disposition of real property, the ECUA the governing body of the ECUA may reject all bids because on the basis that they are perceived or the opinion is that they are too low for the value of the property received. So it is a valid basis for rejecting these bids.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Okay, if there's no further discussion, please vote. And it passes 4-0. Thank you for that good recommendation, Mr. Perkins. The next item is 9F, surplus furniture and equipment, and this was an interesting reading. All of the desks from 1981, workstations from 93. Is there a motion? I know.
I'd like to move staff recommendation.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Please vote. And it passes 4-0. Item 9G is ratification of the termination of ECUA's agreement with Zero Waste. Mr. Beasley, if you wouldn't mind outlining this for us, please.
Certainly, as the board is well aware, there is ongoing litigation. I use the word litigation. It's actually an arbitration, which is the same effect, between the Zero Waste operator, the former operator of the MRF, and ECUA. That litigation is proceeding almost to conclusion. In fact, the final hearing is upcoming, and we're in preparations of that. Settlement discussions have continued, but they have not been fruitful to date. In the last acts of twisting and turning of desperation, the Zero Waste folks have come up with a new defense, and this is that the termination of Zero Waste, termination of the contract, was not within appropriate authority of that of the director. Previous council looked at this, determined that the director did have the authority. I've looked at it, determined that the director did have the authority. What it does, though, is puts us in a unique position of arguing legally in front of another body our own interpretation of our own code, which is unnecessary given the fact if the board will simply ratify the decision to terminate, it can do so post hoc effective the date of the termination, and then we avoid the discussion of the issue entirely, avoid the defense, and avoid the time spent on attempting to reconcile the defense in front of the arbitration panel.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that the board ratify staff's action of the April 30th, 2018 to terminate the ECUA's agreement with Zero Waste for the operation of the MRF.
Move the recommendation.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Please vote. And Mr. Beasley, the date for that arbitration is when? for the hearing?
The final hearing is currently scheduled to commence on September 9, which is soon upcoming.
Thank you. The next item is a notification of emergency purchase requiring no action by the board. We come now to the budget report. Ms. Shelton, do you have a report for us today?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The report that you have before you is a summary of where we are around the middle of August, and the results at this time are very close to what you saw in the quarterly interim financial statements. So I don't really have anything to add.
Anyone have any questions for Ms. Shelton? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I had a question.
I'm sorry, Dr. Walker?
Yes, Ms. Shelton, on page 56, under uses, our operating expenses were about 9% less than the percentage of the year that has passed. And the total uses are 7% below what we might project. Are those real savings, reductions in expenditures, or are we going to see some uptick at the end of the fiscal year?
Well, we still have we have August. These don't include accrued expenses for the whole month of July and August, so we'll see some uptick. And then our capital outlay, we'll have quite a bit of accruals at the end of the fiscal year for capital outlay for work that's been done as of September 30, but we haven't actually paid the money out to the contractor yet, but we still have to accrue those expenses. So we'll see this increase some. I can't tell you exactly.
So we shouldn't get excited about this. Okay.
And we're looking at the water fund, so.
Yes, water and
correct.
wastewater.
So I kind of look at it as sort of being right on target where we need to be.
Okay.
Well, sorry to burst your balloon.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. The Executive Director's report, Mr. Sorrell.
Yes, ma'am, I'll be relatively brief. As you know, ransomware is getting to be a huge problem worldwide. I told you that there were just 13 towns in Texas were just been subjected to ransom requests by some unknown person. The FBI is involved, but I don't believe they found anybody yet. They are attacking a lot of agencies our size and even smaller. We have done a lot, and I'm not going to elaborate on what we've done, but we have done an awful lot and are still continuing to do more. We are using certain methods to try to offset that. It could happen, but it's going to be much harder with us than it is with most others because of the things that we've done. John Don and his staff have done an awful lot, and I just wanted to let you know that we're well aware of it. We are taking a lot of steps. If you ever want to know the technical aspects of it, we'll be glad to give it to you, but not in a public meeting because we simply don't want the bad guys to know what we're doing. But we're pretty well protected, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. But we're better off than just about every other agency, just so you know. Compost, basically it's sold out. The rain hasn't helped us. We're selling actually more than we can make right now because the rain's really slowing us down with this much rain. But I know Panhandle Paving and Grading just bought 3,000 tons. The peanut farmers have bought a bunch. Life Soil's bought, I think, 2,000 tons. So we're actually, business is so good we're having trouble keeping up right now. So the compost business is good. We never stop making the material because the material never stops coming to us through the wastewater system and through the collection system on our solid waste side. But compost is doing well. If it just stopped raining a little bit, we'd be better off. But we just, as we place the compost into the rows and it has to basically cook, the rain doesn't help us with that much moisture, but we're doing well. We've been receiving a number of odor complaints from a gentleman around the Government Street lift station. I think Mrs. Benson's familiar with that. And we have spent a tremendous amount of time trying to figure out what the guy's actually saying. We have placed odor logs, which basically measure the hydrogen sulfide and the odors. We placed them all around the area. We have not found anything. Moreover, we've made operational changes, we've done other things, and we can't find anything to substantiate what the gentleman is complaining about. So I want to let you know, in case you get a call, we have worked on this, Jerry Piscopo and his group, and they have not found anything that really points to the lift station being the cause of those concerns, if there are any concerns. We've also been receiving some complaints from a gentleman in Huntington Creek. Apparently the waste from his system is being sent to Twin Spires, and he's having to pay a homeowners association due in Twin Spires. That is a private lift station. The ECUA has nothing to do with Twin Spires. So the gentleman that's complaining, we've told him that there's nothing we can do. It's not in our jurisdiction. There was just a court case, and we've been removed from the Twin Spires case altogether. There was a settlement made. It's confidential. We were not part of that. We don't know what's in it. But at some point, we may be asked to assume the Twin Spires lift station after it has been upgraded to our standards. We won't take it the way it is because it's a private lift station and it's substandard. But if the gentleman calls you and complains about having to pay the, I guess, 2 homeowner association dues, there's really nothing we can do about it. We have no control whatsoever over it, and we're not part of the Twin Spires. And that's the end of my report, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Sorrell. Now the attorney's report. Mr. Beasley?
I have no report other than the comments I've previously made.
Okay, thank you very much. We come now to unfinished business, and item 13A is transition. I believe that was you, Ms. Campbell? Dale, I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
You know, we've got this transition regarding the executive director, and it's a little uncomfortable, and there's guy's been with us 17 years, so we want to be as fair as possible. And we also want to bring somebody on and let them take control and get started and everything. And he's got retirement considerations and tax considerations and all that. And so we're looking at, how do we move forward? How do we set a date and all this stuff? And so I was just I think it'd be appropriate for us to discuss that. And, after thinking it all over and looking at it, I mean, Ms. Sorrell has to give 60 days notice to the retirement system to get his retirement. So we don't want to put him in a bind by having a floating date or not having a date. And he's also, and we don't, want to string our ratepayers and the committees and the employees and everybody else along, as far as when we will have a new executive director and when they'll have the authority. And we want to let Mr. Sorrell get on it with his life and do whatever his plans, but he needs to be able to plan. So I think we need to just concrete things up a little bit. And what I was thinking, I thought about the whole concept of, we have to select somebody, we have to hire them if they're employed, which I think most of the people, no, not everybody on the list, but most of the people on our list are employed, so they're going to have to give some notice. Now, in a big executive position like this, it's usually at least a month's notice. Now, we're talking as little as 2 weeks' notice perhaps, but they're going to have to give some notice. So we're not going to hire somebody and them start the next day. I mean, because they've got a lot of responsibilities where they're at as well that they're going to have to finish up. And so, I thought about, we had talked about maybe having Mr. Sorrell on for a couple of weeks with the person, have him show them around and stuff. And the more I thought about that, I thought, you know what? When the new person comes in, he or she should be the top dog, and should go around and see and do what they want, hear from staff, but not feel like there's somebody watching over their shoulder or guiding their evaluations or anything, as much as I value Mr. Sorrell's input. And so what I was thinking would be the thing to do would be to, and we'd have to have our attorney, navigate it and sign off and make sure everything's legal and agreeable with Mr. Sorrell and everything. But I think we should go ahead and give Mr. Sorrell a date, whether it's, October 31st or the 15th or whatever of November, so that he can let the retirement system know, and so he can have a fixed date that he can work toward and be planning. And then we may or may not have an executive director by that date, but if not, name an interim for a couple of weeks or whatever it is, and then have the new director come in. Now, Mr. Sorrell has graciously agreed to be available by phone on a non-paid basis, and not on duty or on call or anything like that, but just to be available if the new director decides that he or she wants to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I can't find the password for this file, or what's the history behind this, or what's going on with the engineers and the engineering companies, or anything like that. He's agreed for the next fiscal year to be available because it was his fiscal year budget, to be available by the phone and help out, and I really appreciate that. So I think we should try and accommodate him as best we can. So what I would like to see is for us to go ahead and give him a date so he can work with FRS, and I'm inclined, although not locked in, I'm inclined toward the October 31st date, because that will put a sense of urgency on the whole process. And if we get there and we've got somebody in place, fine. If not, we can take a couple weeks. But if it needs to bounce out to November 15th, I don't have a problem with that. But I would like to see us be able to wrap it up by October 15th, make the transition.
Oh, you said October 31st?
I mean October 31st,
Okay.
yeah.
Just
But
wanted to
November
clear.
15th is workable if the board prefers that. And I would like to see us defray payment to him on any accrued leave or any benefits till after January, so it'll be a next tax year for him. So if he can be on unpaid leave with no duties or no authorities, no pay, while he's on unpaid leave, that's why it's unpaid leave. But then, once January comes, go ahead and pay whatever we contractually owe him, so that he doesn't, take a tax hit for this year, and he can put that toward next year, where he'll have less liability tax-wise. So I think those are things that I could, we can talk about it and put in a motion and stuff, but the main things I think we need to do are we need to have a date to work toward, to be fair to him, and to everybody. And we need to try to defray his final, benefit pay to the next fiscal year with the government, not our next fiscal year, but to the next year, so that he doesn't get, slammed on taxes, because he'll have considerably less income unless he goes back to work. I mean, he may go to work for a higher thing, but I think his plan is to retire and kind of take it easy for a while, from what I understand. So those are just my thoughts on it.
And if I see Ms. Campbell's lights
Yeah,
on.
go ahead.
Mr. Sorrell, how does that fit with your tax evaluations? Because I know that's been a complicating factor.
This has proven to be extremely complicated, and I spent a lot of time talking to the finance director and the human resources director and the Florida retirement system and so on. I do not want to go on unpaid leave for any month this year, because that'll dramatically affect the retirement. What I need to do is go out and just use the vacation time that you owe me. Instead of just paying me for it, I'll just use the vacation time. And that way it'd be the same thing as using it or being paid for it, but I'll be on a paid leave until the end of the year. And what that'll do with the retirement is that'll make the retirement neutral. The way the retirement system works, and I learned this last day or two, but basically the way it works is if you go on unpaid leave for any month, it's zero. And then they go back years back and try to figure out an amount. So you don't want to do that, from what I understand. The best way for me is to go on vacation, which is, you're gonna have to pay for it one way or the other, but I'll go out on vacation till the end of the year. And after the end of the year, then I'll officially retire the first of the year, and you can pay me out after the first of the year. And that'll solve all the problems with the retirement system. It'll solve the problems that you were talking about. And I have enough vacation accrued to where I could go November 15th and be gone for the entire rest of the year, and then retire the very first of next year. There'll be no financial or any other obligations of the ECUA, so there won't be any impact on you, but the impact will be on me if you do anything other than that. That's the problem. So it'll be an impact with the tax system and with the retirement system. That's why I'm recommending this.
Yeah, I follow.
So, Ms. Perkins, to continue.
So what you're saying then is that it would be better for us not to wait to the end of the year and pay what you've accrued, but let you accrue it until the end of the year, and then whatever little bit's left after that, pay it out. Is that what you're saying?
Mrs.
No. The time basically will already be accrued. So the ECUA will be obligated to pay that one way or the other. But what I'm saying is, instead of paying that, I'll just go out on vacation and basically use vacation like any other employee would do. So I'll be in a more or less a paid status until the end of the year. Even though I won't be here, won't be working, I have no say-so on anything. It'll essentially be a paid status at the end of the year. That'll solve the Florida retirement system problem that I'll face between November 15th and the end of the year. So there's no impact on the ECUA at all. No financial impact, no organizational impact. The impact is on me with the retirement benefits and with the taxes after the first of the year. So after the first of the year, I'll go ahead and go out, and then for the sick leave and things, you can pay me at that point in time. But you can't do that until I leave. But I don't want that compensation until after the first of the year because of the tax consequences. So what I've laid out to you, and I sent it to you today, basically lines that all out in a way that I think is acceptable to everybody. And there's really not any implications for the ECUA at all. It doesn't have any financial or organizational impact whatsoever, and it gives you essentially what you're asking for. And I'll be glad to discuss that. I think I've discussed that some with the chairman and with another person, but I'll be glad to discuss it with you and explain it to you. It's real complicated, but I think what I've given you and that document that I sent you lays it all out pretty clearly.
So in response to, I think what your incentive or your motive is to have a clean break around either October 31st or November 15th. And so we would essentially, under the scenario that Mr. Sorrell has outlined, we would hire that person effective November 15th to be the new executive director, which is a pretty reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, or have it unfilled if we don't have it by then, but we should
Right.
should have it hired by then.
Right, yeah,
But-
yeah. Okay, Ms. Campbell has her light on.
Okay, so the one thing that I don't want, and I've never heard of this in my life, is having our administrator train the new administrator. So, you know, they're gonna wanna do things their way, and we've got department heads. So if there's an interim in between there, we have 3 deputy administrators that could step in. And I've talked to Mr. Sorrell, and he's told me in the past that all 3 of those guys could run the utility without him. So I'm not worried about there being like a gap period there. October 31st to November 15th, as long as we take care of, him getting his leave in due time. So I think you're right we just tell the new person to come on November 15th, and if he leaves on October 31st, then we just have these deputies step in, and I'm sure all 3 of them are willing to step in for a couple of weeks.
And I think what I heard from him is the magic date for him is November 15th. So.
Start vacation.
Yeah, start vacation.
So
Mr. Perkins, oh, I'm sorry. Go
So
ahead.
he can leave and the new person can start on the same day or the next day. Yeah.
Right, right.
Okay.
Mr. Perkins?
Okay, it is confusing, so I just want to make sure I understand it properly. As much as I like Mr. Sorrell, what I don't want us to do is to be paying him when he's not working for benefits that he hasn't accrued. So, okay, say he's got 100 days he's accrued, or 200. Well, let's just say
40.
100 for simple math. Okay, he's got 100 days he's accrued, and it's probably more than that. He's been here 17 years. But just say, for simple math, it's 100 days he's accrued. Okay, and we're going to pay him out in January to help with his taxes. Well, the day he's on paid vacation, that should be eaten into that 100 days, shouldn't it?
It does.
It does. Okay, that's all I wanted to make sure of. That's what I'm,
Yeah, so he could go on paid vacation on October 31st,
or November 15th.
or November 15th, yeah. Okay.
Mr. Beasley's light's on, Mr. Beasley.
I just was going to be asked, I assume, to bless this scenario. And one question I had is this number of days, what is it actually, is November 15th selected by Mr. Sorrell? Because by count, that would be the number of days from then to the end of the year that would consume his vacation days? Or will there be remaining days after November 15th that would be available as vacation days to be paid out post-January 1?
Mr. Sorrell?
I think the way it works, that will consume everything that I have accrued for this year. There is a banked balance that'll be required regardless. That'll be next year. And the same with sick leave payout. What they do is I think it's 500 and some hours, normal policy that they pay out. I have 2,000 and something, so I won't get paid for near all of that. So those will be paid next year in a lump sum. But that won't impact any of the vacation or anything that I have accrued up to this point. So essentially what that means is I will use up all the active, I think that's the right word, active vacation that I have by the end of the year. So I think that answers it correctly.
It does, and that's what I assumed you had done, was the math on how many days you had left, and then taking it back to November 15th. That's the question I needed
So
answered.
we-
Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
so we
Ms.
won't be
Campbell?
paying vacation.
Well, we will for when he's on vacation, but not in addition. He'll be eating into it as he
Right,
goes.
exactly.
Yeah, you'll be eating into it, but there is a balance that, it's
Right.
like a banked balance next year, and there's the sick leave, so you need to know that. But you will be eating into it. You will be using up 160 plus 80, what's that, 240 hours?
240,
You'll
that's
be
what I
using all of that
had
between
calculated.
now and the end of the year, between November 15th and the end of the year. So your assumption is going to eat into that is absolutely correct, Mr. Perkins.
I don't know how we frame the motion or anything, but why don't we do this? I'll make a motion that we consider November 15th, Mr. Sorrell's last day, and that we ask the staff attorney to facilitate and coordinate with him over his contract to, to meet his tax goals and protect the ratepayers as far as, leave that is owed and make sure that Mr. Sorrell gets what's owed.
Okay.
That seemed like a reasonable motion.
I think that is. So you are stating November 15th is a date certain for his termination and referring the paperwork to regarding that to our
Attorney, for them to
legal counsel.
finalize and get to us. And
Right,
does
right.
that sound okay? May you ask Ms. Sorrell if that sounds reasonable?
Sound good to you, Mr. Sorrell?
Yeah, I'll work with Mr. Beasley. I've already talked to him some, but basically what I'll do is November 15th is I'll start the vacation and burn up all that vacation till the end of the year.
Yeah.
And then right after the first of the year, I'll be done and just paid out. But essentially, I won't be here anymore after November 15th. Although if you need me,
Right.
you can call me anytime. I'll be glad to help. That's not a problem.
And it may be that the new director would like to have Mr. Sorrell on site for a few days or a week or so and use them, but I just don't want to force that upon whoever that director is, if that makes sense.
But, that's one of the
Ms.
things,
Campbell?
that's one of the things that we could discuss with these candidates when we talk with them of, do you want, to be 2 weeks in with him or not,
Right.
Some people think about that differently. I would personally like the knowledge, but some people may say, well, I want to do things my way, and I've been in both situations, so.
Right.
But, I just wanted to reiterate, if there is any time that we do have these three guys that are deputies that are, the one thing I told Colin Basinger was that, Mr. Sorrell created such a succession, one like I've never seen before, that, he even made succession in his own office, so that, we do have three guys that can step in if they need be. If there's any delay with these guys coming on.
Okay, so this calls,
I
Hey.
second, I second Mr. Perkins' motion.
okay. Mr. Beasley?
I just wanted to add that, make sure that the wording isn't date of termination as to November 15th, but rather last day on the premises or last day in office or something along those lines.
Thank
We're not
you.
terminating as of that
That's-
date.
It has to
Thank you
be,
for
it
catching
has to say
that.
start vacation. That's what Patty was just telling me. It can't say termination because of
Sorry
the
about
FRS.
that.
It has to be the start of the vacation till the end of the year.
Okay.
And my second chance to fire an executive director, and it failed.
Okay, if there's no
Inc-
further.
Incidentally, Mr. Haig did a hell of a job 17 years ago.
I remember that,
Yeah.
yes. Dr. Walker?
Just a quick statement, for those in the audience who may not understand all of this, or on the board who may not understand it all. Mr. Sorrell has accrued many hours of sick leave and annual leave, holiday leave, which he hasn't used over the years. And he's been constrained by board policy on how much of it he can actually cash in for money and so forth. He can't cash in any more than any other employee of the authority. So he has been restricted. So he winds up now with a great deal of leave time as he's leaving. And that's mainly what we're talking about using. If he had used a lot more leave time through the years, then this wouldn't be a big issue, but he's worked hard.
Or we could always give him a gold Rolex and be done with it.
How about a Timex? I'm just-
Okay, please vote. And it passes 4-0, but a Rolex would still be cheaper. Item 13B is attorney, did you bring this up, Ms. Campbell?
did.
Thank you. Sorry about my memory.
So, although I've requested in writing from our administrator on many occasions, a written opinion from the attorney firm of Sniffen and Spellman, Gray Robinson, Beggs and Lane, or Litvak and Beasley about our case against Odom and Barlow on whether it would possibly hurt our case to continue to use the firm, I've not been able to get that in writing. And just telling me, well, no, it won't hurt your case is one thing, but not being able to get that in writing is another. It's my opinion that continuing to use the firm could harm us if a jury trial is pursued. I've expressed this opinion since as far back as November of 2018. I was under the impression that we were only using them for existing cases until last month when I realized that we're using them for new files that are being opened. Mr. Odom resigned. We are suing his firm for malpractice, and we've hired both an interim and a replacement firm. I've spoken to both the interim and the new attorney at length about this matter. Mr. Beasley assures me he can now handle all the cases, both old and new. So I want to make a motion that we turn over all pending cases and open new cases either with our new firm or a firm chosen by them or the administrator if they're unable to handle the file on their own. Once a new administrator is hired, we can turn that attorney choice over to them. And I'd like to add that Litvak Beasley may, of course, reach out to Odom with any questions, and I appreciate that Mr. Odom's been very willing to answer questions. I strongly suggest that you speak with Mr. Rudd, too, about the zero waste, because he had some concerns. But I'm just very, very worried that this is going to hurt that case. And I've had 2 attorneys now agree with me that it could hurt our case if we go to a jury trial.
So, yeah, Dr. Walker?
I'll second the motion for purposes of discussion.
Well, a couple of thoughts. I don't pretend to be an attorney, so obviously anything I say in this regard is personal opinion that's not an educated opinion, but it seems to me that our malpractice case turns on one thing, and that was a spam filter that missed something that caused harm to us. I don't know how using him for subsequent cases would impact that finite event, because I think that's the case. And I'm sure nobody wants to opine in writing because we are subject to open records laws, and anything like this has a different threshold. So I can understand that reluctance. I guess, and I hear you. I understand. I think we hired Mr. Beasley. He's our guy now, and I want him to be handling the cases. I think that we are in a period of transition, and I'm willing to be a little bit flexible. Mr. Sorrell's going to be gone in 2 months, and he is working with Mr. Odom on a few things, and I'd kind of like to give him the latitude to let this sort of unwind. So I'm less concerned about, the malpractice case than just having a smooth transition. We're having a transition on 2 fronts, and it's tricky to manage that. And so I would like to be just a little flexible about it. But I appreciate you bringing it up, and I think we
Yep.
certainly wouldn't want to continue with this 2-headed attorney, no, not a 2-headed attorney, two attorneys for the board. But I think we can sort of make this work until November 15th is my thought. Mr. Perkins.
Well, good discussion, and I kind of relate to what you're saying, Ms. Benson. But a little differently. I mean, I'm skeptical that we will ever recover in the Odom Barlow malpractice case what we will spend to litigate it. And so I don't think it was a good decision to litigate it, even if we win. I don't think we're going to recover what we spend, and I think our chances of winning are not that great anyway. So, but I'm not a lawyer, so that's just my observation. But I do know that some of the cases, take years, and they have a history with different judges, different defendants, different witnesses, paperwork. I mean, and so that institutional knowledge is pretty important, I think, And I would hate to, I'd hate to remove that asset from cases that he's been working on and that are pending and stuff. Now, new cases, probably another question, but yeah, I don't think it'd be worth. I don't think it would be worth, cutting him off from the cases that he's been working on and litigated, probably appeared in front of judges and stuff on already, maybe arbitrated some. I mean, I don't know what Mr. Beasley thinks. It'd probably be worth hearing his opinion, but I think that's a pretty good card in our deck. I'd hate to throw it away and not use it.
Well, I didn't make the motion without speaking at length to our attorney about it, and he assured me that he was ready and willing to be the attorney for this board and take on all new cases. I just don't think that he's been given the chance to take on those new cases. So it's just, our job is, this board's job is threefold. It's the attorney, to hire the attorney, to hire the administrator, and to set policy. And I feel like we hired an attorney and now we're tying his feet because we're not giving him the new cases. So it's just my as working in a law firm for 40 years, it's just the way I see it. So I'm fine with not getting a second from the board, but I think
you got a second.
You did.
Oh, I did. Okay. I just think we should give him all the new cases that come in. He can. My motion said he is more than happy to speak with Mr. Odom, and I appreciate Mr. Odom being there to answer the questions. But when you hire a new attorney for the board, you need to let him do his job. That's just my sentiment.
Any other discussion?
Well, I think the motion also said, past cases too, so.
Well, and I had the discussion with our attorney, and he assured me that he can be up to speed. Now, I know that the rest of my board doesn't know the law, but I'm a layman, and I can pick up a file and within a certain amount of time tell you everything that's going on in that lawsuit. And it's only because I've worked in a law firm, I can look at it and tell you what's going on in the lawsuit. So I have no question. We hired an attorney that he can take those cases and look at them and know how to move forward. It happens all the time. If an attorney leaves a firm, someone takes those cases over for them. They don't take the cases with them. So, it happens all the time. I just know that it is something that our attorney can do, is take over cases that are pending.
Dr. Walker?
Madam Chairman, perhaps Mrs. Campbell could tell us what it is that she is objecting to or doesn't want to continue happening. I'm not quite clear on it.
Ms. Campbell?
So, we hired a new attorney, and I would like to turn our legal matters over to our new attorney. That's what I want to do, what we hired him to do.
Dr. Walker?
Madam Chairman, if I may, Are we continuing to hire Mr. Odom to handle new cases?
Yes, sir, that is what I've been told.
Perhaps someone could explain why, explain the rationale for doing that.
Do you want me to defer to Mr. Sorrell before I acknowledge you? And Mr. Sorrell, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I can probably add some clarification. Essentially, all the new cases are going to Mr. Beasley at the Litvak Beasley firm. I communicate with him, even today. One of the staff members brought up something, and I told him, communicate with Mr. Beasley. So that is taking place, but there are a lot of old cases out there, a lot of things where quick answers are needed for institutional knowledge and so on, and occasionally the staff does call Mr. Odom and ask him. But that is changing. That's all changing. That is going over to Litvak Beasley. There's also one issue that Mr. Beasley can't represent, and that's the human resources issue. That has to be a separate and distinct attorney. We've used, forget the name of the firm, Ms. Longoria, I think, was on that before, because Mr. Odom couldn't do it when he was general counsel. So that can't be done. That has to be done by a separate attorney just because of the law. And I discussed that once before with Mr. Beasley. He understands that. So there are situations where we have to use other attorneys, but generally, new cases that come in, everything's going to Litvak Beasley. The big cases have all been turned over to him also. There will be times when I talk to Mr. Beasley when Mr. Odom's institutional knowledge is needed, and he may have to communicate with him, and I think they're communicating on a somewhat regular basis now. For example, the zero waste case, that's going to be a big one. Bradley has to be part of that, and I think Rob's going to be part of that also, or Mr. Beasley. I hate to call him Rob, but Mr. Beasley. So it's a transition process that's taking place. The new cases are going to Litvak Beasley without any question. There are certain other situations that can't, and it's just by law it can't. But Litvak Beasley's doing a great job. I've been very impressed with him. Mr. Beasley especially. I mean, he doesn't miss a beat ever. So he's taking over and he's managing all the cases, but as far as saying just cut all the cases and go, that's probably a mistake, because there's a lot of cases out there, not a lot, a few cases out there to where they need to be finalized. And I've asked Mr. Beasley to be part of those, to oversight all those cases, to make sure they're being done according to what the general counsel wants to do, and that's worked well. But as far as certain other things, there's just things we can't do by law, particularly on human resources cases, because there has to be that separate distinction there. And that'll have to be done by somebody else. And it could be Longoria, it could be Odom Barlow, it could be anybody. I know that the board passed a conflict waiver on November 18th of last year with the firm of Odom Barlow. That was requested by Gray Robinson. So what that essentially means is the board approved using Odom and Barlow for other things as long as it's not related to the Arizona Missions malpractice case. So that has already been approved by the board. We can't do anything that has any impact on that. But basically, it's already happening. Exactly what you want to happen is happening. Everything's going to Litvak Beasley, all the new cases, and we're just trying to wrap up all the old stuff.
Mr. Perkins? Thank you, Mr. Sorrell.
Well, and that's what I thought was happening, and if it wasn't, I'd be concerned about it. And you know, if the maker of motion wants to put it in a thing that all new stuff goes to them, I mean, I'm fine supporting that, but it sounds like it's already happening. But like I said, I don't think we should cut off that lifeline, you know, for cases where we may need them. I think it would be irresponsible to do that.
Ms. Campbell?
So we just were told that we're still using Odom Barlow for HR cases. New ones. New ones, yes. New ones, yes. That's what he said. So like it did in November, I was the only one that voted against that waiver of conflict. And I'm just reiterating that I think it would hurt our case. It may not hurt our case if we go to a judge trial, but if we go to a jury trial, I would use it against you in a heartbeat if I was the attorney on the other side. So all I'm doing is protecting my constituents. This is not personal in any way whatsoever. I would be doing the same thing if it was Robert or Emmanuel Shepard or anybody else. It's not a personal thing. I'm just doing the job that I was hired to do. I was hired to do the best thing for the constituents and protect their interest. And their interest is for me not to be using a firm that I am suing for malpractice going forward. So I will be voting yes on this.
Mr. Perkins?
Not sure I understand the motion, so could we have
So,
it reread? So we
The
know what
motion
we're-
is, I would like to make a motion, we turn over the pending cases and open new cases either with our new attorney firm or a firm chosen by them. If they are unable to handle the file on their own, once an administrator is hired, new administrator is hired, we can turn attorney choice over to him for all new cases. I would like to add Litvak Beasley may, of course, reach out to Mr. Odom with any questions and appreciate that Mr. Odom has been very willing to answer questions. And I have spoken to Robert Beasley, and he is comfortable taking our cases. And we hired him for that.
Well, my thing is, I'm not comfortable turning over pending cases and having that, that history and knowledge and stuff. I think we should leave open access to that. But I am a little bit uncomfortable, having the new cases go to them, even the human resource cases, I guess. I think, it's kind of like the executive director. I mean, once we cut ties, it's a pretty clean cut, and once we cut ties with Mr. Odom, I feel like it should be a pretty clean cut there too. As far as new cases now, where he's been working and has got a great deal of knowledge on the process and what's going on in the litigation and stuff, I think we should retain him. I mean, I think he'd be by far the best person on those cases. But I'm kind of torn on the motion because I agree with part of it, but part of it I don't agree with.
Well, why don't we hear from our attorney on if he thinks he can handle these cases and call Mr. Odom if he needs his assistance? Would you be willing to?
Mr. Beasley, would you like to speak on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me see if I can clear up some of this issue by giving you kind of a historical account of what I've done to date in my observations. First of all, we're using a colloquial term, cases, which is probably part of the confusion. When I took over as counsel, as I mentioned in the very first meeting, attempted to capture the universe of everything that was going on with ECUA. That included litigation files, which is how we would refer to cases. And that would be a file in which a claim is pending, either as us as plaintiff or us as defendant, either in some forum. That is how we use the term cases, meaning litigation files. We listed all of those files. We were given direction then as to who retained which of those files. I've simply got back the list with Beasley or Odom on it. And so there was a decision made, not by me, I assume by a combination of Mr. Odom and Mr. Sorrell, as to which files would be allowed to go to my firm and which files would be retained by Mr. Odom. We followed those instructions. We received the files we were allowed. We've moved forward with those files. So that's when we talk about the word cases, that's what I think. So when I was asked by Ms. Campbell, and she is correct, did I feel adequate to handle any cases, including the pending ones, my answer is yes. It happens all the time. There's nothing, I'm aware of the other cases that are pending that Mr. Odom has retained, fully aware of the facts and details in them, have absolute confidence that our firm could take over tomorrow and be up to speed and running and take those cases to fruition without a concern. That does happen all the time. So when we use the word cases, that's what we're talking about. I do not know of any new cases, litigation files, that have been assigned to Mr. Odom since my signing of the contract. I do not think that has occurred. I think first of all, I don't think there have been any new cases since I took over in July. If there were some, I feel confident they would have come to me or I'd have known of them. There have been one claim that was brought to my attention by your claims adjuster in-house. There was a specific talk, so that's one category of litigation, which is Mr. Odom has retained certain litigation files by someone's decision that he needed to stay on them versus they needed to come to me. I was not part of that decision. And if asked the question again, I would say I have absolute confidence. If every one of those files comes to my office tomorrow, we'll handle them, we'll get them down the road, and it won't be a problem. There's nothing that complicated pending that's a concern for me or my firm. Those are cases. The second category was the HR matters that were mentioned. There is a procedure by law that the general counsel could not participate in the HR cases, which would be an internal HR litigation matter from an HR dispute. There are none pending. This issue has not been addressed since I took over. It was that Ms. Longoria handled it, so you have this need for a second separate counsel because the result is a recommendation to the director, which then general counsel weighs in on the recommendation. So you could not have counsel, the same counsel at both levels. My understanding is Diane Longoria handled that. Brad Odom played the role as general counsel. There was that separation. There was a suggestion that by Mr. Sorrell that Mr. Odom could play that role in the future. It won't be me either way, whether if Mr. Odom is the best qualified candidate for playing that role because he understands the process, it might be a good idea. And that was my advice on that. But we haven't crossed that bridge because there are no such claims at this time. The third category is what we're all kind of dodging around but maybe don't understand exactly, which is that certain members of the staff and Mr. Sorrell on a almost daily basis contact legal counsel to ask questions, concerns, float issues, ask for interpretations, and those things. And that creates a large volume of the legal work that ECUA pays for, basically. I would say a good bit of that goes to Mr. Odom remaining at this time. There are certain staff members that up until even today, consistently the issues they're working on are issues they've worked on with Mr. Odom. They're not doing it to prejudice me in any way. It's just they're continuing to work on issues that Mr. Odom had given them advice on before. They haven't been given hard instructions not to use Mr. Odom because he's not the lawyer anymore and I am. And so they just continue to call him. And that when you talk about institutional knowledge, it's in this category that institutional knowledge is very important. Because if he's continuing to get called on certain similar or related matters that he's been called by the same engineer for in the past, it kind of makes sense to call Mr. Odom again. Mr. Sorrell, I believe, has a relationship with Mr. Odom that goes back many years, and I think he's comfortable picking up the phone and calling Mr. Odom to get his take on certain issues, and I think that still occurs. Those are new matters. They're not cases. They are new matters that occur on not a daily basis, but on a weekly basis for sure, and that continues to occur. Mr. Odom's value to this board is, and it would be impossible for me to meet with him and say, brain dump everything you've learned in the last 10 years so that if I get one of those calls, I'm able to answer the question efficiently. And so that transition will prove to be the most difficult. Can I answer those questions if I were called? Probably. It would take some time, but I think I can read words and figure it out. Can Mr. Odom answer them more efficiently because he's answered the same question 5 times in the last 10 years? Probably so also. So at some point there needs to be a clean break because it is, when you hear that your counsel has advised this, you may be hearing that I advised it, you may be hearing that Mr. Odom advised it, because I may not have even been asked. And I don't say that in a way that I'm eager for all the work and it's mine, mine, mine. It's just that's what's happening. We are in a transition period. That is part of the transition. So when we want to talk about what's going on, that's exactly what's going on. Mr. Odom is getting new calls for new matters, but they're not cases. They're matters related to work or knowledge that the staff member or Mr. Sorrell believes he has a better handle on than I do. There's been a couple new things come up that I was aware of that Mr. Odom was brought into. That's what's happening. And if the board does not like that or wants to stop that, then that's okay. At some point there needs to be a clean break. But right now, that's the phase we're in. I hope this helps.
Ms. Camp. Would you say, Mr. Beasley, that what your experience is seems to be, and I don't think you've done something like this before, but does it feel like a normal transition to you, or do you feel like you are being moved, excluded on things you should be included on? And I guess that's really not a legal question, that's a personal question.
Yeah, it's more of a personal question, and it's not one I'm able to answer because I don't have any perspective of the volume of calls Mr. Odom still gets. I don't know what questions he's being asked that he's answering out of his, history and fund of knowledge, as you would call it. I don't know if it's 10 calls a day or 20. I know the ones I get, and I know the department heads, and there are some that the department heads have started calling me. I believe I'm their new guy. And I don't believe there's any calls to Mr. Odom on that. There's some that I know I'm not their new guy. And I know, in fact, Mr. Sorrell calls Mr. Odom. I just don't have a way of judging that volume. So if it's a large volume, there needs to be a process in which it's transitioned over. If it's a small volume, then it's probably perfectly acceptable and normal. You know, what this is all about from both lawyers' side is how to efficiently service the client. And, you know, if Mr. Odom knows the answer and then Mr. Sorrell can pick up the phone and answer it and that quick, and I got to spend an hour, then that's a couple $100 difference. And so that is normal. The cases, retaining the cases, I didn't see any need in doing that, but that's the decision that was made. At the time, I had received a volume of cases, certainly wasn't begging for more. But if you ask me, as Ms. Kimball did, and she's accurately reflecting our conversation, could our firm handle every single case that's out there? Yes, we could transition it tomorrow without any concern. It's the daily calls that I think we're going to have to, you know, just wean ourselves down on or transition in a way that's best for ECUA.
Mr. Perkins?
Well, I think I think the reasonable, rational thing to do, because it is a transition, is work toward a transition of November 15th, moving everything to Beasley. You know, just start moving the cases now. You know, cases may not be the word, but, you know, after or the hire date of the new director, have all calls be directed to Mr. Beasley at that point. But I think that, you know, I didn't know one attorney kept files and the other didn't get them. I was under the impression that you had a copy of everything and he had a copy of everything. So I would want that to happen at the least, you know, and start making, you know, an orderly transition where we don't lose the institutional knowledge, and that there's some process for Mr. Beasley to communicate with Mr. Odom and then acquire that, but for us to, you know, with all this other transition to move toward that clean break as well.
And I am going to vote no on the motion, just because I believe that we need flexibility in the transition. And in fact, if our malpractice case has been contaminated by our still using him, it's contaminated. It's nothing's going to change about that. Certainly, I believe the will of this board is for Mr. Beasley to take the cases, and I think he has assumed a lot, and I think I, for one, am very pleased with him as our attorney, and I think he's ready for more, and I'd like to see that happen. I believe when we have a new executive director, that person will turn to Mr. Beasley by default. There won't be a prior relationship. And I think that is all going to happen organically. And I believe we have sent a message that Mr. Beasley's our guy. And, but I don't think it's necessary to vote for this motion in order for all of this to happen very smoothly. So I will vote no. And Ms. Campbell, I appreciate you raising the issue. Sometimes it takes that for a good discussion. Dr. Walker?
Madam Chairman, you have, your opinions echo or are like mine. Mine are like yours. And I appreciate your stating it that way.
I see no more lights, and we've kind of beaten this, so you have a motion on the floor. Please vote. And it fails 2-2. It's one of those times we need another board member, isn't it? Okay, we come.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Can I make a motion? I would like to make a motion that we direct Mr. Odom's office to provide copies of all ECUA files to Mr. Beasley's office.
Is there a second?
Second that.
And I'm not saying transfer the files, but make copies so that he knows what's there.
Yeah. Any other discussion?
Well,
Please.
I think that would be smart, since if he's going to take them all over on November 15th, he would give them some time to get up to speed on them, so that would be great.
Please vote. passes 4-0. Okay, we come to new business. We have no items of new business. Board communications, Ms. Campbell?
Oh, no.
Anyone have anything under board communications? We come to open forum, and this is our second open forum. Did you wish to address us a second time? That's fine. You'll just need to fill out another pink slip when you finish.
And again, I appreciate your time. I know it's late. I'm Erica Floyd, again, 2940 Bayview Way. And I just want to make sure my message was received earlier, because we spent a lot of discussion on, I am a small business, I'm a disadvantaged business, I'm a woman-owned business. Yes, that is a fact. I fall into that category, but I'm a qualified engineer. Just, again, happen to fall into that. The point was that ECUA requested that the community of engineers respond to an RFQ, and we did. And no one was added to a list that hasn't been updated or modified, revised since 2006, which is kind of staggering. But your advice to me is don't give up, keep trying. But what is the incentive to do that? If no one was added to the list this time. So the point is, are you ever intending on it, or is this just going to be another of the same? So.
You know, I think I heard Mr. Sorrell say that we use lots of engineers that are not on our list, and I assume that your resume has been kept by the engineering department. So actually, I'm not sure why this list exists since we go off of that list at any time. But I would hope that they would find an opportunity to use your firm. You're clearly qualified by the jobs that you've done. I would just communicate with Mr. Stacy Hayden and say, you know, don't forget about me, I'm here. And I think it could easily happen.
And I'll do just that. Thank you so much.
And I think, Ms. Campbell, did you?
Well, I was just going to say, you know, as you've heard here today, we're in a big transition period. We're going to have a new lawyer. Well, we have a new lawyer, but he's going to be the lawyer here in about 45 days or 60 days, and then we're going to have a new administrator. And with every new administrator, our administrator's done a fine job, but he's used to certain engineers, I believe, and like certain lawyers as well, which is not a bad thing. But the new administrator that comes in may want to bring in and choose his own engineers, you know. So I would say, you know, that's one question I'm going to talk to them about, you know, when they come. So I appreciate you coming today.
Sure. Thank you so much.
For that reason alone.
I see no more lights. I see nothing else. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.